Hello, and welcome to round 2 of the Parenting Roundabout podcast. I'm Terry Morrow, and I'm here with Catherine Haleko.
Hello.
Usually on this podcast, we talk about parenting issues, but once a week, Catherine and I like to get together to discuss TV, movies, books, and other entertainment topics, because it's nice to talk about something other than parenting for a change. This week, we finally got finished with our West Wing watch by listening to the final lengthy podcast episode. But first, speaking of final things, we watched the last episode of The Good Place called Whenever You're Ready, which we weren't, along with 2 very lengthy episodes of The Good Place podcast, mercifully less backslappy than usual and more substantive.
Yes.
Mostly Mike Schur walking us through the episode and all the things that went into filming it and all the things that they were thinking about as they did it, some of which I buy, some of which I don't, but we'll get into that. At length, I'm sorry to say. Before I get to my ranting and raving, what did you think of the episode, Catherine? Were you happy with it? Did you feel like it ended the story where you wanted it to?
I think so, largely. I mean, like you had issues with this whole,
Yeah.
when you're done, you're done. And that was
when
hard.
life gets boring, feel free to end your existence. Is a message that I'm not sure I can really get behind.
Right. And as you pointed out, with time being so elastic in the afterlife, how do you get to that point? Like, How does Chidi decide that he's done when he could continue spending time with Eleanor? That part is very hard to buy.
That was a problem. And listening to the podcast and reading reviews, I get that Eleanor still had more work to do, and she couldn't do it with him there. And that all makes sense, but I think they sunk themselves with that gorgeous ending to last season with the 2 of them, that heartbreaking separation. And you can't wash that out of your mind and now look at this and say, okay, he's ready to move on. Good for him. Bye, Chidi. Because, oh my gosh, they had this, you can never stop thinking of them sitting on those chairs watching that movie of their life and then splitting up for this, meaningful reason, but still just devastating.
Yeah.
So this is, I think if she had left first, it would have been a nice reversal of that and it wouldn't have felt so wrong. But you can't because Eleanor's got to be the last one. I get that. Yeah. So it was unfortunate, I think. And, in and of itself, if you could watch it just this episode only, it was fine. But boy, I can't get that other one out of my heart. That just makes me cry whenever I think of it. And so it's like, Chidi.
Right. What are you doing, man? Yeah. I mean, I did like the way they handled Jason and Tahani and Michael.
Right.
I think each one of those, they gave him a little bit of a different spin to each person, and they made sense.
Yeah. I mean, for the end, looked at as the ending of a beloved sitcom, it was really nice. Each character kind of got their ending. And I mean, Michael getting to go down and be a real boy was delightful. Tahani is now going to run the afterlife eventually is perfect. And Jason just sitting monk-like in a forest for 1,000 Baramies waiting for Janet to come back is a nice cap on his, although we never got an explanation for why he has been different this season.
Yeah,
which
we never
seems
did.
like a big loss. And we also never got an explanation for the I in Baramy, but I guess, he's got to leave some things on the table.
So tell me your theory or your...
Well, here's where I came around on it. I will say that when I got to the end of the episode, I felt disgruntled. And that kind of awful coda of the cast on Seth Meyers.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, Mike Schur explained that they did that so they could make the episode the length that they wanted, and then they had to fill the extra time. Although he also talked about all this stuff they had to cut that sounded wonderful. Why not just make it, an hour and a half? But that was just so rushed and weird that it was like the extra dollop of disgruntlement on top of everything else. But I my quarrel basically being, this is not a Christian view of the afterlife.
Right.
That we believe, you're in a different state of being. These things would not matter. And I wish for that reason, not that I expect a sitcom to give me especially one by people who are not of my faith to give me the vision that I want. I just wish they had just booted the whole thing and had the last image of the show be them going off on the balloon to the good place. Then you don't have to worry about it. Mm-hmm. Everybody can imagine their own good place. Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to be the kind of person who says, if this piece of entertainment does not fit in my rigid ideological box, it must be destroyed. Yeah. Of which there are many these days. Mm-hmm. And I also don't want to be like, I really enjoyed the heck out of Lost for 4 years, but I didn't like the ending, so give me my time back, you terrible, terrible people. Yeah. I like the show. It's a sitcom. It's not Sunday school. I don't want to put the weight of having to be meaningful on it to determine my enjoyment. So I thought about it. I read reviews. I listened to the 3 hours of the Good Place podcast, and I think that the framework I'm going to put on this to make myself okay with it, and I think even though I don't think the creators meant this, I think that they have allowed for it, possibly unwittingly. I think it's a parable for what you have to do to get into the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. That it's more than just disavowing your sins and burning those off and dealing with them, making reparations or whatever. You also have to lose your bonds to what is human. You have to lose your bonds to your loved ones, to your family, even to your sense of self before you can make that move on. You know, the Bible, I was looking up there's a Bible verse about a woman married seven brothers in succession. As each one died, she married the next one in hope of getting an heir, and eventually she dies childless, and Jesus is asked, which one is her husband in heaven? And he says, heaven's not about that. Mm-hmm. You're angelic beings in heaven. Right. You don't have these earthly relationships. So I think it's really interesting to think about. It's unthinkable to us to leave our loved ones behind, to imagine a state of being without our loved ones. And really, The Good Place has been so much about what makes us human, and so much about friendship and responsibility and what we owe to each other and all of that stuff. Exactly, yeah, so I think this is sort of an image of, all right, what does that mean? You have to get to that place where you're not sad, it's not a tragedy, but you're just ready to leave that behind. Mm-hmm. And so by that, way of thinking, as you go through that arch in the trees, which is not a door, why do they keep calling it that? But when you go through the arch in the trees, that is heaven. Right. That is heaven as anybody wishes to conceptualize it. Mm-hmm. What we've been going through watching is sort of a benign purgatory, I guess. Yeah, you could see it that way. So I'm thinking of it as a parable, that you don't want to put the whole weight of this is, a rigid ideological description of what the afterlife is like. It's a sitcom, but you can see it. You can get meaning out of it. And that's the meaning I'm going to take out of it. And it's interesting to me this way. Yeah. And then based on that, I can say, wow, Nick Offerman cameo. Cool. And that's Mary Steenburgen teaching Ted Danson how to play the guitar, and she's his wife in real life. That is so cool. And Mindy and Derek, and wow, look at all this neat stuff. I don't have to feel like, but I don't approve. So, well, and that's where I came.
Even though it's a very Buddhist way to look at it, yes. I did enjoy that all the people in their lives eventually made it to the good place.
Yes. I hope it took Tahani's parents a really long time.
A billion Baramies. Yes.
They had some work to do.
They had a lot of work to do, but that's basically reincarnation, right? I mean, it's doing it over and over and over and over until you get it right. Right. And in this concept, it's just that they do it in the afterlife instead of in successive layers on Earth. Yes. But that was a wonderful way to end it as well, to see.
Yes. And they finally released Simone and Brent and whatever that guy's name, who's Tahani's friend that I can never remember.
That guy's name.
Yeah.
That guy, yes.
They released them from where they were frozen in time while all this stuff was going on. We hear about mothers and
Eleanor's
parents.
Horrible roommates became her horrible Arizona trash. Who are
still honestly
actually made it to the good place.
Yes, and are still honestly pretty awful, but
right. But they've somehow
we wanted to see them one more time, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, as a finale to a TV series, it was very satisfying because of getting to see everyone
Yes, and I feel like the ending to the Good Place podcast was very satisfying as well. Who knows if they're going to come up with additional episodes of people taking a victory lap, but this did not feel that way. These 2 episodes, part 1 and 2, all of it with Mike Schur and Drew Goddard, talking about how they made the episode and what the challenges were, and, some backstory on other episodes, but just sort of, it was really had a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I was very interested. I mean, I think it was more than 3 hours between the 2 of them, and I did not regret the time listening at all. I was very, very happy to hear it. It made me want to go back and watch the episode again, and also maybe some other episodes again. Very, very nicely done. Yes. So I have enjoyed listening to that podcast, but sometimes they are just having a little celebration party for how cool they are, and those are less fun.
Yeah. So, and this one was not.
This one was not that way at all. It was
really packed with,
yes,
background stories, and this is why we did this, and this is how this came about, and just lots of really good information. Yes.
And also little things that were cut that it's fun to know about.
Yes.
So highly recommend
Easter eggs,
listening
like
to that.
Parks and Rec Easter eggs.
Right.
Tons of stuff like that.
Yeah, there was talk about the finale of that too. That was very nice. So, yay for that little chaser after what I am now going to consider a satisfying finale.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah. So, speaking of finales, satisfying and we finally got to the last episode of the West Wing podcast. They had been milking this thing out pretty good with extra episodes, but we wanted to just finish watching the show. And so we have been a little ahead of them. And now they finally had released their episode on their podcast episode about the TV episode tomorrow, the finale. And so they had half an episode talking about that, and then half an episode talking to pretty much anybody in the Los Angeles area who had ever been on the show who wanted to show up.
It was ridiculous. It was truly
it really was.
40 people. And it was so unsatisfying because each person only got 2 minutes.
Right.
I mean, obviously people like Aaron Sorkin talked more. And it was important to have them. But, you know, like the guy who played either Ed or Larry or whatever, like it's fun to hear from those people, but then they're done. Yes. It was only a couple of minutes, and there was way too many people.
Yeah, it really was. And, if you're going to do that, either do it as a separate episode so that you can give people more time, or, winnow it down a little bit. We even got Allison Janney on the phone again, which I think they've already done.
They have, and she had nothing to add. I mean, I love Allison Janney. She had nothing. She was like, "Hi, everybody. Okay, bye."
Yeah, I know. It's like, which I think she more or less was the last time too.
Yeah.
Where Melissa Fitzgerald, we know you have her phone number. We know she's watching your house or something. Good for you, but don't do that shtick twice.
No.
And I mean, personally, for me, the whole listen was worth it for Allison Smith singing Tomorrow. Like the Annie veteran she is. She's still got it after all these years.
Yeah.
Good for her.
That
was very fun. That she was game for that. I assume they warned her in advance that she was going to have to do it, and if not, it's all the more impressive because she just went from zero to belt.
Belted that out. It was quite.
Yep, I guess if you do that long enough on Broadway, it never leaves you.
Muscle memory right there. Good job.
Yes, that was fun.
I mean, it was right there with the name of the episode.
Right, it's perfect.
Tomorrow. And it was a lot better than the previous live episode where it was about, they kept singing tradition and every single 3-syllable word.
Right.
Oh my God, that was... Stop.
It was Transition, that episode, right?
Transition.
Yeah. That, I've generally enjoyed the West Wing Weekly podcast more often than not, but as with the Good Place podcast, some of it has been more substantive than others.
Yes.
And the ones that really get into, I think what we all want from these podcasts are really behind the scenes information about how things got made, how things got written. And they've given us that somewhat, but sometimes not as much. So, I think it's still a fun companion to listen to after you watch the episodes, especially if it's the first time you've seen the episodes. But, I'm glad they're going to go put it to sleep now and move on to other things.
Yeah. Same.
Yes. And speaking of moving on to other things, we're at a bit of a crossroads here. We have ended 2 watches at the same time.
Not really on purpose, but not just happened that way.
At all. If we had been thinking about it, we would have done it differently. But we have no dancing show to throw in. We have the One Day at a Time is coming back, but it's not coming back yet. So we've been thinking about what we want to do and whether we want to reinstate our challenge round or whether we want to find other things to have watches of. And so this is what we've decided for now. Next week, first thing we're going to talk about is Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which has been released as a pilot by NBC and is probably anywhere that you stream, you probably cannot escape the pilot of Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. It's all over the place. It's an hour-long show that's about a woman who, for reasons, has a bunch of songs downloaded into her brain, and she can read what other people are thinking in the form of them singing songs and dancing in front of her. So, bit of a high concept, I guess you would say. Possibly a foolish concept, I guess you would say. But, singing, dancing, Mandy Moore choreography, and actors that are recognized, Peter Gallagher and Mary Steenburgen. So there's our connection with The Good Place. Play her parents. And so I watched the pilot. I enjoyed it very much. My daughter enjoyed it very much. Critics that I've been reading have not enjoyed it very much. So it may not be on for long. But for now, we're going to, for next week, watch the pilot and talk about it. And then maybe decide whether we're going to watch more episodes when they come along. And similarly, because we just can't get enough of Kristen Bell, we are going to try starting a watch of Veronica Mars, which is available on Hulu from the very beginning and also possibly at your public library. And it's also, there is a new podcast about it, well, newish, I guess they've gone through the first season already, called Veronica Mars Investigations. It has as a co-host Helen Zaltzman, who's podcast The Illusionist we enjoy very much. So we thought we would watch an episode of Veronica Mars and listen to an episode of the podcast and decide whether this is something we want to commit to watching the entire series of. So that is what we will be doing next week if you would like to join us. And that is going to be it for our Round 2 today. Please subscribe to our Parenting Roundabout podcast so you won't miss any of our episodes. We have something new for you every weekday. As always, you can find recaps, links, and an opportunity to comment on our website at parentingroundabout.com. Goodbye, Catherine.
Bye, Terry.
Goodbye, everybody.